get my 6, where you'll see a beautiful view of the pond. In its autumn glory. Well, not officially yet. 3 days away from fall, and I'm excited. It already feels like fall. You'll have to forgive my voice. I threw it out yesterday at the UVA football game, where we beat ODU by 2 points with a field goal as the freaking clock ran out. 2 seconds left on the clock. We're down by 1. Very rough day for the offense. All right, you heard it. Let's go up here and investigate. I was getting ready to start this video over because I'm here to talk to you about the one simple thing most of you are doing on a daily basis that is literally taking years off your life. Not talk to you about UVA football, go Who's go. And I was going to stop and start over again, but I heard that very distinct, loud, clear tree knock up here in the potential Bigfoot Sasquatch forest. So let's go up here and see what we may or may not see. Here's a better view of the pond, maybe. There's no brush here. This is where we feed the fish. Oh, there they are. There they are. They know I'm here. They can feel my vibrations. Watch this. I'm going to throw my arm out and they'll think it's food. Isn't that mean? That's terrible. I'm teasing them. Oh gosh, now there's like 40 of them there. I got to come feed those guys. So basically, my topic I'm going to talk about today, while you watch behind me once I get up here into the forest, is based upon, it's inspired by a video I watched this morning, dark and early, around, I don't know, 6:30. I was waiting on the sun to come up, which it's finally done, so I could go out and run. Just did 5 miles, and I'm reminded of the gratitude I have for having run this 5 miles and for the 30 plus miles a week I've been running for months upon months now, and for the consistency with which I've been running for the last couple of years. And it's all because of a video I watched at 6:30 this morning from Jim Stump, who's got a channel called Counselor's Couch 101. His video was very ironically timely for me because of something that happened yesterday at that UVA football game. Somebody I ran into, and I thought, man, this is worthy of being talked about, because I think a lot of folks are in this position, a lot of folks who might not have seen Jim's video or may never see it. So here's the story. Jim's video was titled Only 40 More Years. And not to steal his thunder, I want you to go watch his video, and I'm going to put it at the end of this one so you can. So when this video is over, when all the videos pop up, the recommended next videos to watch, his is going to be one of them, from Counselor's Couch 101. Only 40 more years. And he tells the story of how there were some guys in their 20s who had a sales job. They'd go into their office to work. They were in their cubicles, and they would take up their little pitch cards, and they'd make these cold calls and pitch products the company wanted them to pitch. And in time, they started to very much not really like their job. And every Friday, they'd say, well, at least it's Friday, only one more day. They stayed at this job that they didn't really like, was making them miserable. And then they started noticing, they would say on Thursday, well, only 2 days to go. On Wednesday, it was, well, at least it's hump day. And so one of the guys comes in on a Monday, and he sees one of his other guys there at the desk, one of his coworkers, hanging his head, looking all dejected. He says, hey, what's wrong? And the guy puts his head up and he says, only 40 more years. And that's when it occurred to that guy who had come in and seen how depressed this other guy was. Because these guys were in their 20s, and they thought, oh my God, this literally could be my life for the next 40 years if I don't do something, if I don't make a change. So that guy, he had the balls to quit, and he did. And he went on and he did other things, and he lived a life of joy, which is something most people don't know what that term means because they've never experienced it. Most people live a life of contentment. They lie to themselves when they get stuck in what they call a groove, which is really a rut. They've been doing the same thing for many years, job-wise. They convince themselves not so much that they like it, but that they can tolerate it and that they continue to do it. Their bills are paid, and they say, well, you know, hey, things could be worse. I'm in a groove. Well, no, you're in a rut. So here's what happened to me yesterday. Years ago, I had a sales job. I could so relate to the story Jim was telling. I sold investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities. And it was okay. The first couple of years, I think I was content at most with the job because I liked the idea of it. I mean, I come from a lower socioeconomic background in Appalachia. My family roots are tied to coal mining and timbering. I was a first generation college graduate, and I thought, look at me, I have arrived. I've gotten out of Appalachistan, I've gotten educated, now I'm over here in Charlottesville, People's Republic of Charlottesville, and I have a job where I get to wear a suit and a tie when I go to work and wingtip shoes. But after all that kind of wore off, I realized I didn't really like what I was doing. And some of the guys did. Listen, the thing about jobs, and I've often talked about jobs I hated that made me miserable. That one didn't make me miserable. It wasn't really for me. And I knew that, and I stayed there for too long after realizing that. That post office job made me miserable. That sucked. I'd rather go back to the Army than go back to the post office. There's a book. Who wrote it? Charles Bukowski in the 60s, late 60s? It was called Post Office. This guy was a struggling writer his whole life. You talk about irony. Listen to this. This guy, Charles Bukowski, I think the name is, wanted to be a writer. And he did write. And he wrote. And he was pretty good. He was okay. But that's a hard industry to get established in back then. It's not so much now because of social media. You can build your own audience like I have on YouTube. And then you can pitch your work like I have to your audience on YouTube, and you can make a decent living doing it like I do on YouTube. And thank you, everybody who's allowed me to make that happen, because you've made it happen for me. It's been like a team thing. Well, this Charles Bukowski guy, he wasn't making it happen, so he finally gave up the ghost, as it were, and he took a job at the post office. And he worked at the post office for about 10 or 12 years before he finally retired. He was in his 60s, I guess, and he had been a mail carrier. He spent the majority of his time as a clerk, especially in his final years. And he wrote a book called The Post Office, and I've read it. I've got it down there in my personal library. It was the best-selling book, not just of the year of its release, but of its decade. I think it was the 60s here in America, best-selling. Catapulted him into stardom, and he's like, what? I mean, can you imagine the irony of that? So that's an example, too, of why we should never give up on our goals and our dreams. And I think the reason the book was so successful, because I read it, and I read it after I'd quit the post office myself. And had I read that before I started working at the post office, I would have never worked at the post office. Nothing's changed since he wrote that book in the 1960s based upon his experiences from the 1950s through the 1960s. So anyway, but there are people who work at the post office who like it. There's a place for everyone out there, and there's everyone to fill every place. So just because it doesn't work for some of us doesn't mean it's not going to work for all of us. But listen, when we know it's no longer working, we need to have the balls to do that which, and I'm getting to my story, but Travis Stagel over at Fighting Past 40 did. He's made several videos on his channel, Fighting Past 40. Go support him if you haven't already. He was an engineer. He was a first generation college graduate. This is a man I met at basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. We went to basic training together, AIT, and then we went to airborne school together. He walked away from a high-paying engineering job to join the Army, and people told him he was crazy. But he had overcome great obstacles in his life. He was, and these are in his words, he was the fat kid that got bullied at school all the time. He wanted to change his life, and he did, and he got into physical fitness, and he lost more than 100 pounds and found that his true passion in life was fitness and healthy diet, exercise. So he left that desk job and pursued his passions, and he became a Green Beret in the United States Army and served in Afghanistan in 2011 in that capacity. Amazing. People told him it was crazy, but he found joy. See, there's happiness and then there's joy. Joy, it's hard to describe, but it's when you know you're doing that which you were constructed by the Creator to do. They say that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I found that to be true. And when you have the courage to go out and do that which you're passionate about, you only have to be uncomfortable for a season or two in regards to money, in regards to, what do they call it, benefits, whatever. You find out how wonderful those benefits are when you try to exercise them, don't you? Mm-hmm. Oh, you haven't met this requirement or that requirement or that requirement. They're so much like a carrot dangling before a horse or a jackass. All right, let's walk around a little bit. I'm still doing my cool down. So anyway, all these years ago, 15 years or so ago, 18 years or so ago, I had this job I didn't like, pitching products, investments. Knew it wasn't for me. But you know why I didn't want to leave? I'll tell you why I didn't want to leave. Because I worked for a firm that was unique in that they didn't have like one office in a community in which they had 20 brokers. If they have 20 brokers in a community, they'll have 20 different offices, and they'll have them spread out across the community evenly. Well, I had done something amazing for this firm I worked for. I was the only person in the 20-plus year history since the establishment of their firm in this community who had actually opened an office from scratch with 0 clients, 0 customers, and built a book of business to the point to where I had actually become profitable for the firm. I was earning enough in revenues to where after all the overhead was paid, this way overpriced Charlottesville rent, utilities, my training, what they put $100,000 into you in the first year to train you too. It's a wonderful training program. I was finally profit, and this is after me taking home my money, my cut. The firm, the partners were making a profit. I was the first one to have ever done that. Now, I had a guy that worked out of another office with my firm that was a buddy of mine. He was a buddy. I liked the guy. I'm looking down at the ground because I may have found a yellow jacket's nest. No, just a squirrel was looking for a nut. So, if I were to leave the firm, this guy, they would have transferred all of my assets I'd built up into his book of business, into his office. And I knew he was waiting. I mean, the more I talked about how this job really wasn't for me, because he talked about it too. He was the guy that was always bringing it up. He had taken over the office where 5 or 6 other brokers had walked away from what they had built, and he walked in on several millions of dollars worth of assets, so he kind of hit the ground running. And I was jealous of that. I was. I'm not going to lie to you. And so I was very proud of the fact when I surpassed him in production. Plus, he's got a master's degree from the Darden School of Business at UVA, and I'm just a dumb hillbilly from West Virginia. So I'm told by some of the pretentious snobs I've met in the People's Republic of Charlottesville area. So I saw it as if I was really doing something. I mean, hey, I'm not supposed to be able to read and write, and they're surprised that I'm not talking funny because they thought people that came from where I came from talked funny, and I'm out producing this guy who went to Darden, right? But then I finally asked myself the question, how long do you want to be miserable to be right? Because in life, we can either be right or we can be happy. We can be happy or we can be right. So I finally left that firm. I went into private practice for a while, and then it really occurred to me, it wasn't just the firm, it's the whole industry. I don't want to do this. And so I left that, and like Travis Daigle at Fighting Past 40, I went into the military, and then thus began my 6-year Army stunt. So then my little vacation over to Iraq, which was not much of a vacation. So there's been times when I've looked back and I've thought about what would things be like today if I'd have stayed with that job, if I'd have kept that job, stayed with that firm. At a minimum, at an absolute minimum, well, you know what? I know that at an absolute minimum, I'd be making about $300,000 a year. Not $1 million, but maybe 600, somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000 a year. Well, okay, that sounds like a lot of money, right? Well, I'm not doing so bad here, and I'm going to leave it at that. So I think, well, I don't care about that. But then I think about quality of life. And I've often thought, okay, I think I might be miserable. My suspicion has always been that I would be miserable. Well, yesterday, I'm at the football game, and I'm outside the restroom area with my son. My wife's in the restroom. We'd just gone up. It was halftime is what it was. And we were here's what it was. We were sitting at a picnic table on the side of the stadium opposite the sun, because it wasn't super hot yesterday. It was about 82 degrees. But when that sun's beating down on a football stadium, it gets hot. That's probably why my face is a little bit red, not just from the run, a 5-mile run. So we're sitting there. I'm talking to this wonderful older guy from down in Lynchburg. We're talking about deer hunting and life out in the country and all this, and how UVA could really benefit from their offensive line pulling their heads out of their butts and giving our totally awesome quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, enough time to throw the ball. He's got a cannon for an arm. Led the nation last year in passing yards until he got hurt a little more than halfway through the season. Ended up number 2 for the season, even though he missed a game and a half due to injury. So anyway, here comes that guy walking through the stadium, and I've run into him a couple times in town since I've been back over the last 6 years, and my wife's met him before, and my son's met him, and he's a good guy, and I still like him. Now, I don't go down to his office and talk to him, and I don't text him and say, hey, let's go fishing. It's like an acquaintance at most, someone that I know and that I always speak to when I see him, and I will tell you, I genuinely feel good when I see him. I feel happiness when I see him, and we always spend several minutes talking. I feel that he gets the same feeling when he sees me. I never disliked this guy, and I don't think he was waiting around like a vulture hoping I was going to leave that firm so he could just pounce on my assets. I think he knew from the standpoint as a businessman, I mean, hey, he did go to Darden, right? That if I did leave, his book of business was going to more than double, and that would benefit him. And that happened, and good for him. I'm happy for him. He's married, he's got children, and I'm happy he's doing well and his family's doing well. Let me tell you, when I saw him, because I hadn't seen him for a couple of years, I felt so grateful instantly that I left that job when I did. I was reminded of how grateful I am that I've decided to take my personal health seriously again. It's not that I never took it not so seriously, but I was laying off. I was resting on my laurels. I was an athlete. I was a natural athlete. Yes, I had to work hard to achieve what I did. State championship miler in high school, scholarship runner, track and cross country in college, badass infantryman in the Army, PT stud, 360 PT score on the extended scale. Those of you who are veterans knows what that means. For civilians, listen, the PT scale, the highest you can score is a 300. They had to pull out the sliding scale chart, extended scale chart, to rank my scores, and I was 35, and in the year 2007 scored the highest PT score on all of Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry, home of the Rangers, home of the airborne, home of the special forces, home of the Green Berets. So I'm the kind of guy that if I go out and jog 2 or 3 times a week, I'm not going to be fat ever. And I could go out and play a pickup basketball game and take people half my age to school just because they'll get worn out and then I'll just trounce all over top of them. That's just how it is, okay? But I've been resting on my laurels for several years. And just a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what, let's start taking this thing seriously again. Cut out the ice cream, cut out the junk food. Although I love my wife's Filipino food, cut back on it to get away from the rice and a lot of the fried porks. Eat more fruits, eat more vegetables, and be more consistent with the running. Don't go out and jog 2 or 3 days a week, but actually take it seriously again to the point to where I started racing again. With original plans of being the fastest man over 50 in Central Virginia, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And so I've been feeling bummed out about that lately, because it's like I'm doing all this running. I'm running 30 miles a week. I've lost 30 pounds literally in 2 years, but I'm getting beat by people who, 20 years ago wouldn't have qualified to race in the same meets as me. Then I saw that guy. And this is not a knock on him. This is not to assassinate his character in his absence. Dude looks like a heart attack waiting to happen. Heart attack waiting to happen. 80 pounds overweight. And the thing of it is, he's a little bit shorter than me. Excess weight is more apparent on shorter people than it is taller people. So I'll leave that at that. And I know his lifestyle. 12 pack of beer every night because, well, he might not have 40 more years to go, but he's probably got another 15. You know, and he's gone from counting down the days till the weekend to counting down the years till it's over. But he stayed because he's in a groove, might be the term you're taught at Darden Business School. Where I come from, up the holler, where, you know, Chuck Yeager said he came from a holler there in West Virginia so dark they had to pipeline the sunshine up into it. I can relate. We don't call it a groove, we call it a rut. And I mean, call it hillbilly ingenuity, whatever you will. We know that when you're in a rut and things ain't so good, it's good to get out of that rut. And Jim Stump talks about this in his video. He probably did a much better job talking about it than me because he's not a dumb hillbilly from West Virginia. He's from the West Coast. He knows bigger words than me. And I'm not knocking Jim. He's a great guy. Very humble. If you've not watched his videos, you need to. I'm going to put, again, that one at the end of this one. He's got such a relaxed demeanor, such a peaceful demeanor. You will feel calm and soothed just from listening to him talk. So go listen to him. I chose for me not to live that way. And like Robert Frost said, I took the path least traveled, and it's made the entire difference ever since. I've found that to be the case. Was it easy? No. I went through periods of hardship. There were times when I didn't have enough money to pay my bills. There were times I incurred debt that buried me, that just I didn't think I was ever going to get out from underneath it. It was very uncomfortable. It was very unpleasant. But I'm through it now, and I'm on the other side. And let me tell you, I've never in my life, I'm going to be 49 years old in 2 months. I can't think of any period in my life in which I've been happier and in which I have lived in a state of joy more so than the life I'm living today. So it's out there. If you're miserable, if you have that job you hate that makes you miserable, walk away from it, leave it, quit. Simply going to work every day to a place where you don't fit, it's not for you, and you know it. It's that one simple little thing you're doing every day that is literally taking years off of your precious life. See you for more next time.